You know what's funny? The moment you stop chasing someone who keeps running, something shifts. Not in them, in you. For a long time, you probably believed that if you just loved them a little harder, were a little more patient, or said the right words, they would finally open up. You saw glimpses of connection, right? Little moments that made you think, maybe we're getting somewhere. But with an avoidant ex, love often feels like standing at a locked door, knocking politely, then desperately, while they pretend they don't hear you. And the hardest part? You blame yourself for why they won't open it. Here's the truth. When you stop caring in the way you used to, everything changes. It's not about becoming cold or bitter. It's about taking your power back. Because caring about someone who constantly withdraws becomes a full-time job that drains your worth. When you stop caring, you stop waiting, you stop analyzing every text, stop replaying every conversation, and stop trying to decode silence as a secret message. Instead, you begin to see it for what it is. Emotional unavailability wrapped in charm and confusion. And the magic? That's when the avoidant starts to notice the absence of your attention. They feel the quiet where your energy used to be. Suddenly, the person who needed space starts wondering why the air feels colder without you in it. But here's the catch. By the time they do, you're no longer seeking their validation. You've grown. You've found peace in your own company. You've realized that love should never feel like convincing someone to care. When you stop caring, you stop performing. You stop trying to earn something that should have been freely given. You start showing up for yourself the way you once showed up for them. And ironically, that's when they often come back. Not because they've changed, but because you have. They sense that emotional detachment, that newfound self-assurance, and they're drawn to it. But by then, you'll see the dynamic clearly. You'll recognize the difference between genuine love and emotional breadcrumbs. You'll stop wanting the person who made you feel small just to feel needed again. You'll crave peace, not chaos. You'll value connection that feels mutual, not conditional. So what happens when you stop caring about your avoidant ex? You finally start caring about you. And that's when your healing begins, not when they come back, not when they apologize, but when you realize you no longer need them to. Detachment is often misunderstood. People assume it means becoming cold, distant, or heartless. But true detachment isn't about shutting your emotions off. It's about reclaiming your energy. When you stop caring about your avoidant ex, you are not saying, I don't love you. You are saying, I love myself enough not to keep losing me while trying to keep you. That shift in focus, from chasing someone's attention to nurturing your own peace, is where your real power begins. For so long, your emotional world might have revolved around their moods, their texts, their silences. You felt pulled in different directions, trying to interpret what every action or lack of action meant. Every time they withdrew, you tried harder, thinking your love could pull them closer. But avoidant people tend to pull back the more you reach out, the more you chase, the further they retreat, because intimacy feels like a threat to their independence. And so you find yourself in a painful loop, trying to prove your worth to someone who's running from connection. When you finally step out of that loop and detach, it feels uncomfortable at first. There's a silence where chaos used to be. You start noticing how much of your mental space was consumed by anxiety and waiting. You may even feel guilty for letting go, as if detachment means giving up. But it's not giving up. It's growing up emotionally. Detachment is the quiet decision to stop begging for love in places where it can't exist. It's the realization that no matter how much you care, you cannot make someone ready for emotional intimacy. You begin to accept that their avoidance is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of their fear. And once you see that clearly, something powerful happens. You stop trying to fix them. Instead of pouring your energy into deciphering their behavior, you redirect it toward yourself. You start asking different questions. Not why don't they want me, but why did I keep chasing someone who made me feel unseen? That self-inquiry leads to empowerment. You begin to see that you were never powerless. You just gave your power away to someone who couldn't hold it. Detachment is taking it back. It's the moment you realize that peace of mind is more valuable than attention. You no longer want temporary validation. You crave emotional stability. You no longer want mixed signals. You want mutual effort. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop waiting for a text and start living your life again. This kind of power isn't loud. It's not about revenge or proving a point. It's calm, grounded, and confident. You no longer need their acknowledgement to feel worthy. You start to understand that what once felt like rejection was actually redirection, a chance to return home to yourself. And that's where detachment becomes beautiful. It's not the end of love. It's the beginning of self-respect. It's the silent revolution that happens inside you when you realize that loving someone should never mean abandoning yourself in the process. Clarity doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with silence. When you step away from your avoidant ex, you finally start to see what was hidden behind the emotional fog. Distance becomes your teacher. It allows you to look at the relationship without the constant noise of anxiety, overthinking, and unmet expectations. For the first time in a long time, you're not reacting to their mixed signals, their push and pull behavior, or their sudden disappearances. You're simply observing things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. And that's when the truth starts to surface. You begin to notice the imbalance that once felt normal. You realize how much effort you put into maintaining a connection that was never truly mutual. Every text you initiated, every apology you made just to keep the peace, every time you downplayed your needs so they wouldn't feel pressured, it all comes into focus. The distance gives you perspective that closeness could never provide. When you're inside the dynamic, you're blinded by emotion. You keep excusing behavior because of the bond you feel. You think if you can just be a little more understanding, they'll finally open up. But when you step back, you start to see how much of that hope was built on potential, not reality. You see the pattern. Their withdrawal wasn't random, it was consistent. Their silence wasn't confusion, it was avoidance. And your constant effort wasn't love, it was survival. This kind of clarity doesn't come easily. It comes after sleepless nights, after the tears, after you finally stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. But once it arrives, it changes everything. You stop romanticizing what was and start accepting what is. Distance reveals the truth about compatibility. You may have loved deeply, but love alone cannot sustain a relationship when emotional safety is missing. With time and space, you begin to notice how drained you felt around them, how much emotional energy it took just to feel seen. You recognize that the relationship often revolved around their comfort, not mutual care. And in that realization, you find compassion, not only for yourself, but even for them. You see that avoidant people aren't necessarily cruel. They're just scared. But their fear doesn't have to be your cage. You can understand their wounds without carrying them. You can love them from afar without losing yourself up close. That's the beauty of clarity. It doesn't come with bitterness. It comes with understanding. You begin to forgive yourself for staying too long, for trying too hard, for mistaking inconsistency for passion. The fog lifts and what's left is truth. A relationship should make you feel secure, not small. And the clarity that follows distance teaches you that love is not supposed to be a puzzle to solve. It's supposed to be a peace you feel. Once you see that clearly, you no longer chase confusion disguised as connection. You start to crave something purer, something calmer, something real. Comes a moment when your silence becomes louder than all the words you ever spoke, when you finally stop trying to reach your avoidant ex, when you stop explaining, fixing, and proving. Something shifts in the dynamic. Your absence starts to speak for you. They may not have heard your pain when you were crying or your disappointment when you were trying to communicate, but they will notice when the noise stops. Avoidant individuals often thrive on emotional control. They pull away to create distance, and you move forward to close the gap. It becomes a pattern of pursuit and withdrawal. They get to feel wanted and you get to feel anxious, but the moment you step out of that cycle and no longer play your part, the balance changes. Suddenly, the energy they were used to receiving disappears. The texts don't come, the reassurance is gone. The constant effort that once made them feel safe from rejection, ironically, fades away. At first, they might not react. Avoidant people often convince themselves they're fine without closeness, that they prefer independence, but time has a way of making absence echo. When your consistent attention and warmth are no longer there, they start to feel the emotional void they once created. They might not understand immediately, but they feel something missing. The late night scrolling through old photos, the sudden curiosity about what you're doing, the unexpected jealousy when they see you moving on. That's their discomfort speaking. Yet, here's the crucial part. By the time they notice, you've already begun healing. You're no longer waiting for their validation because you found a new sense of strength in your silence. Your absence doesn't just affect them. It heals you. It teaches you that your energy is valuable, that your love is not something to be thrown at someone who only half receives it. You start realizing how much emotional space they took up in your mind and how freeing it feels to reclaim it. The peace that follows your detachment feels foreign at first, but then it becomes addictive. You no longer crave their attention. You crave your own calm. You no longer chase their acknowledgement. You find comfort in being unseen if it means being unbothered. That's when your silence turns into power. You stop needing closure from them because your peace is the closure. And yes, sometimes your absence wakes something up in them. They might reach out, test the waters, or try to pull you back into the old dynamic. But you'll feel the difference. You'll recognize the same patterns you once romanticized and realize you've outgrown them. Their attention, which once felt like oxygen, now feels small compared to the self-respect you've gained. You'll see that your silence didn't just speak to them. It transformed you. It taught you that sometimes the loudest message you can send isn't through confrontation or confession, but through stillness. Because when you stop showing up for someone who took you for granted, you stop teaching them that your presence is guaranteed. And when that happens, they're finally left to face what they ran from all along, the emptiness that no longer includes you. There comes a point when you realize that the person you were fighting for was never supposed to be the prize. And you were, for so long, you might have tied your sense of worth to whether your avoidant ex wanted you, responded to you, or chose you. Every moment of affection felt like a win, and every withdrawal felt like a failure. But once you step back, you begin to understand that love isn't about earning someone's approval. It's about mutual recognition. You start to see how much energy you poured into trying to be enough for someone who couldn't even meet you halfway. That's not love. That's self-abandonment disguised as devotion. And when you finally stop trying to earn their validation, something powerful happens inside you. You begin to shift from proving your worth to protecting it. Growth, in this sense, is about choosing self-respect over validation. It's about realizing that someone else's emotional distance doesn't define your value. For a long time, you probably mistook their avoidance for mystery or their inconsistency for depth. You told yourself that if you could just be more understanding, more patient, or less demanding, they'd eventually open up, but you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Avoidant individuals often interpret emotional closeness as pressure, not connection. So every time you reached for intimacy, they retreated, leaving you questioning your own worth. Growth is what happens when you stop taking that personally. You start to see that their avoidance says everything about their fear and nothing about your lovability. Once you stop chasing validation, you start to experience peace. You stop walking on eggshells, trying to keep the connection alive. You stop apologizing for having feelings. You stop editing yourself just to be accepted. You realize that love shouldn't feel like a constant test. You're doomed to fail. It should feel like a safe place to land, not a battlefield for approval. That's when you start growing into the version of yourself that no longer settles for breadcrumbs. You begin to crave consistency instead of chemistry, emotional safety instead of excitement, effort instead of excuses, and that shift from seeking validation to demanding respect changes everything about how you love. Ironically, it's often when you reach this place that your avoidant ex might come back around. They sense your detachment, your calm confidence, your lack of need, but this time you're different. You no longer see their attention as a gift. You see it as an option and not one you necessarily want, because now you understand that growth means valuing yourself too much to repeat old patterns. You recognize that real love doesn't require you to shrink to fit someone's comfort zone. It invites you to expand in a space where you're seen and appreciated. That's the essence of growth over validation. Realizing that your peace, your energy, and your self-worth are too precious to gamble on someone who only shows up when they fear losing you. Healing doesn't happen the day your avoidant ex leaves, and it doesn't even happen the day you decide to stop caring. Healing begins quietly, the moment you realize your peace is more important than their presence. It's a shift that starts inside you when you stop looking for closure from someone who was never capable of giving it. For so long, your mind might have been trapped in the loop of why? Why didn't they choose you? Why couldn't they love you the way you loved them? Why did they pull away every time you got close? But healing starts when you stop asking why they didn't stay and start asking keen why you kept holding on. Because that question leads you back to yourself. It's where you realize that your attachment to them wasn't just about love. It was about trying to feel worthy through someone who couldn't even face their own emotions. When you start prioritizing peace, you begin to rebuild yourself piece by piece. You stop checking your phone for their name. You stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen. You stop hoping they'll suddenly realize what they lost. In that stillness, you start to rediscover who you were before the chaos, the version of you who didn't question every word, who didn't live in constant anxiety, who knew how to breathe without waiting for a reply. Healing isn't glamorous. It's messy, lonely, and slow. But in that process, you begin to see that self-respect feels better than false hope. You realize that staying in a relationship where your needs were minimized was costing you more than walking away ever could. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop negotiating for love. You no longer try to convince them to understand you, to change, or to stay. You accept that their emotional distance isn't something you can fix. And when you stop trying to fix it, you free yourself from the constant tension that once defined your connection. You start setting boundaries, not to punish them, but to protect yourself. You stop chasing closure because you recognize that the only closure that truly matters is the one you create within yourself. The moment you decide to move forward without answers. Healing is when you realize you can love someone and still choose to walk away because your well-being matters more than your longing. As you continue to heal, you begin to understand love differently. You see that love isn't meant to drain you. It's meant to ground you. You stop romanticizing intensity and start valuing consistency. You stop mistaking distance for depth and unpredictability for passion. And most importantly, you learn that love shouldn't require you to sacrifice your self-worth just to keep someone around. The peace that follows that realization is unmatched. It's the kind of calm that comes from knowing you no longer need them to apologize or come back for you to feel whole. Because healing isn't about forgetting them. It's about remembering yourself. It's about realizing that the person you've been waiting for to save you was never your avoidant ex. It's you. In the end, letting go of your avoidant ex isn't about winning or losing. It's about reclaiming your peace, your power, and your sense of self. When you stop chasing someone who runs from love, you finally start running toward yourself. You discover that closure doesn't come from their return. It comes from your decision to move forward with grace and strength. So choose peace over chaos, growth over validation, and self-respect over longing. Thank you for listening. And remember, the most powerful love story you'll ever live is the one you build with yourself.